Tales of Estolia.
With our hands intertwined, we let go of
Written
the
by Sashina
flames
Kaufman.
of fading day. We just drift away.
Volume
With
1.
your head
The
on my
Promise of
shoulder,
Zacharias.
the world feels so light in the still of the hour. Under
Part
stars
6,
shining
Prophecy.
bright as the city hum fades. In our secret small space, we're entwined in our world.
Chapter
a serene,
13.
tender
Love.
grace.
The 7 deities of Centrath were always referred to, collectively, as a unit. None were considered above or better than the others, and perhaps more importantly, none were lesser deities. The bedrock principle of the faith was the need to consider each of the deities to be of equal importance. Ancient art depicted them in a circle, evenly spaced, or in a semicircle. Ultimately, for ease of expression and for the ability to fluently share the faith with new converts, children, and the interested. The 7 deities were given names to distinguish them. It never seemed to strike the adherents to the faith that it was unusual to believe in 7 deities and their attendant faiths, especially when many claimed to be the one true God. That fact was always conveniently overlooked, or, according to some writings, that was one of the guiding principles. Somi, one of the Septinatro of Palmyra, addressed the perpetual battle between chaos and good. Despite the victory of the 7 deities over chaos, there is no guarantee that the forces of chaos might not recover, return, and destroy all that the 7 deities had created. Because of this, each individual must see themselves as being a participant in the perpetual struggle against the powers of chaos and in favour of the logic and order of the 7 deities. Once committed to battle chaos, the 7 deities rewarded the faithful with all that they might need. Milton Peru, Biblical Influences on Middle-earth Linguistics.
While they were talking, Nico was guiding her out of the library. He paused to kiss her briefly before he turned and led her rapidly to a set of double doors. Once through them, he turned to look at her.
As a rule, men in my country tend to be very romantic, focused in on the sensation of giving our soul into the keeping of our mate.
He smiled one of his quirky dimple-enhanced smiles.
Part of the acolyte year, we spend time discussing the romantic turn of phrase the most erotic capitulos use. We discuss how to express ourselves best when we experience the extraordinary moment when our soul leaves our body and takes up residence in the sweet embrace of the wonderful soul of our Kaylee.
Kenzie began to unbutton the shirt he was wearing while he spoke.
My brother said that the capitulos did not really help. He said that I must experience it to be able to discuss it and appreciate descriptions of that moment written by our ancestors.
He brushed her hair away from her face, cupping both sides and staring into her eyes.
I realized how true that was when I met you. My heart was so fully involved, I knew in a moment that there would never be a woman I would be able to love other than you. No way for any other woman to rouse me.
You really love me, Nico?
She asked. She slipped her hand under the shirt, touching his hair-roughened chest.
Kenzie, your sweet self has taken hold of me completely, heart and soul. I know the exchange has not yet taken place, but I feel as if you have already taken my soul into your keeping, as if our connection to one another is already indelible and unbreakable. I do not know if I could survive if you rejected me.
She pushed his shirt off his shoulders and leaned towards him, bending her head to taste the warm, salty skin of his neck. His unique scent filled her senses. He tugged at the ball gown's zipper, dragging it down her back with one steady, sure motion, and then pushed it off her shoulders to pool in a brightly colored puddle at her feet. She dropped her hands from his chest to the belt holding his pants up. She unfastened both belt and zipper before pushing his pants down over his hips. He bent down and slipped his shoes and socks off, stepping out of them. When he straightened, he surprised Kenzie by sweeping her up into his arms. She met his eyes with an uncertain expression. He smiled at her as he crossed the room to the large bed, laying her gently down on the soft surface.
I love you, Kenzie. You matter more to me than anything else, more than my family, my religion, my nation.
He climbed onto the bed next to her, covering her mouth with his, escalating from small nibbling to deeply passionate kisses. While he kissed her, he began to caress her breasts through the fabric of her camisole. Her hands explored his chest, his shoulders, his stomach, and encountered the fabric of his underpants. He tugged her camisole upwards until she sat up and helped him to remove it, and her bra. Only her silk and lace briefs remained. His eyes met hers for several heartbeats, before his gaze dropped, and took in the sight of her unconfined breasts. He leaned towards her and saluted both with mouth and hands. His touch felt like he was throwing kindling on a small fire, encouraging it to roar into blazing life, the fire of her desire. She had admired his firm buttocks many times over the last week, and enjoyed the freedom to caress them now. She mewed in pleasure as he teased and tormented her nipples. She slipped one hand under the waistband of his briefs, caressing the skin and rounded contours of his rear. Soon her second hand joined the first. She pushed his last item of clothing down his legs. After a moment, he paused in what he was doing to finish removing his briefs, dropping them on the floor. When he returned to her, his lips were on hers, one hand on her breast. She caressed his silky skin, tracing the contours of his aroused flesh, enjoying the contrasting textures of crinkly hair, hot taut and loose, cool skin. He mimicked her explorations, his hands first delving under her briefs to caress and cup her rear, before he pushed them down her legs. When he dropped them on the floor and returned to her, they were both completely naked. They explored one another, his hand trailing down her torso to her hips, while she continued her tactile adventure of discovery.
Nico.
She said his name, her hands going from his shoulders to his rear end. She was going crazy, needing, wanting his possession. In that one word, she knew he could hear the last of her uncertainties melting away. This was what she wanted, what she needed.
Kenzie.
He repeated her name, his eyes meeting hers. Somewhere in the palace, a clock started to chime as Nico's body surged forward, crying out with her as they both experienced a momentary disorientation followed by pleasure.